Alright, so today we've already filled the NMR with liquid helium. So I'm going to show you now how to fill the NMR with liquid nitrogen. The first task that you must master when doing the nitrogen is you got to be able to figure out how much nitrogen is in the Dewar of the magnet. Alright, in order to do this, what you do is you come to the first vent tube and you pop it off. Notice that this first vent tube always has the ice on it, and there's a reason why. Because this vent tube has a stopper just like the rest, but there is a slit in this one, right? So this is where it actually vents. When it reaches a certain pressure, it pushes this open, and it will actually allow the overpressure to be released. All right. So again, that's why you have the ice formation on this one and not the others. All right. So now that we have our tube exposed, we can go ahead and take our measuring device. Now, this measuring device has two alligator clips, and typically you put the alligator clip kind of low. And what you're going to do is you're going to literally put it in, and as it goes up, it's going to push the alligator clip. And you're going to keep going and keep going, and you're going to keep this next to your ear, all right? And you're going to listen. You're going to hear a hiss, and the hiss is the gaseous nitrogen coming out. As soon as you hear a spit, all right, a spit as in somebody like spitting in your ear, or you feel a cold bit of liquid on your ear, that's actually liquid nitrogen, and that's when you stop. So if we stop it, and the top of the tube, this is the top of the tube, and it goes up, and it stops the alligator clip here, we can measure the difference, all right, from the bottom here to the alligator, and that's going to be so many centimeters, and that's how we measure how much nitrogen's in the tube. So, without much ado, let's do it. So I'm going to go ahead and stand. I'm going to put this next to my ear. Alright, so I got a good bit of liquid nitrogen touching my ear, and so this is the distance. And over here, underneath where we keep our tubes, you'll see that we keep meter stick. Alright, this is our centimeters. So just by looking at this, going from 0 and straightening out the tube, I can tell that I'm at 54 centimeters. Now you can get down to 68 centimeters is still safe. All right, 68 centimeters is still safe. Right now, this instrument was filled 4 days ago. All right, so how often do you have to fill this? My typical rule of thumb is you fill the instrument every 5 days. You really should do it every 6. But why do I do it every 5? Well, I do it every 5 to get on a cycle. Monday, Friday, then the next Wednesday. Then the next Monday, Friday, then the next Wednesday. And you know to ask yourself when you come into work, oh, did I fill the instrument on, it's Monday, right? Oh, no, that's the other Monday, right? And it's much easier to keep track of. But if you do it every 6 days, you get off cycle. And then every day you're asking yourself, going, oh, great, is this the day? Is tomorrow the day? I mean, even if you write it on your calendar, it's always going to be in the back of your head because you really don't want the sucker to quench, right? Because then you're going to have to explain to everybody in the faculty meeting why you let it quench, right? So there's a little bit of stress, and if anything, that's the stress that it comes in. All right, so I do it every 5 days. I've heard of people doing it being lucky on the 7th day, right? Maybe not a full 7 days, but on the 7th day they can still get away with it. But right at that point, the Dewar is so low, you put in some fresh liquid nitrogen in, and the transfer process sloshing around, you're really running into the risk of quenching the magnet. All right, even if there is liquid nitrogen not quench, just transferring, the act of transferring is enough to cause it to quench. So, in terms of number of days, I do it every 5, all right? So if I forget on day 5, I can still come in on day 6 and I'm okay, all right? So that's like my safety net, all right? So there's 2 main reasons. The safety net, and it makes the calendar process much easier to handle mentally. The other thing is the full magnet's going to be somewhere around 34 to 33 centimeters, all right? So when you know you're at 34 to 33 centimeters, you know the magnet's full. Again, 58 to 62 is typically where it is when I fill it. All right? Now, you can go all the way up to 70, but I would not pass 70. All right? 70 is really getting into the danger zone of being too low. All right, so now that we've measured it, we can go ahead and get our tube. All right, and for this type of transfer with liquid nitrogen, we're going to go ahead and use the rubber tube. Now what you want to do is you want to look at the two ends, and depending upon how nicely they were cut, all right, it's going to help you out. Now notice this one's a little bit more jagged, this one's a little bit more straight. This is going to go on the liquid nitrogen Dewar, and this one's going to go on the NMR, all right? Just the way in which the fitting is. This is going to actually be a little bit harder to get on the nitrogen because of the divot, and it will want to slip off a little bit more. So just look at the fittings, and notice this one's cleaner, this one's a little bit dirtier, and that's also going to give you a hint on which one goes to which, right? So again, the dirty, more flat one's going to go on the Dewar. This one's going to go on our NMR. All right, so we're going to go ahead and remove the rest of our vent tubes. We're going to go ahead and add our hose. All right, you just push it down onto it. And then on the Dewar of the liquid nitrogen, you're going to hook it up to the liquid. Okay, so you're going to put it on the liquid. So you're going to go all the way as far as you can go. Hold it there a little bit, and then you're going to come over to our friend Mr. Velcro. And you're going to strap this on. Now, what does the Velcro do? The Velcro does two things. It supports the tube because, as you know, as you pass the cryogen, it's going to become more fragile. And the weight of itself, with being fragile from being cold, and if you knock into it, it's going to shatter, right? If not shatter, it's going to literally split down the seam of the tube. All right, that's happened to me a couple times. So what you're going to do is you're going to hold that there, and you're just going to simply open up the liquid, right? The liquid valve. Notice at first it's going to sound like a freight train, and it's going to pulse, and you're going to see it act pretty gaseously and pretty violently compared to later. There's a couple reasons. Because you're pushing the liquid, the cold cryogen, across this room temperature tube, and you have to warm up this warm tube in order to get liquid into the NMR Dewar. All right. Again, this is why you want to make sure that you're not too low. Again, every 6 days is good. 7 days is really, really pushing it. Again, I really don't suggest waiting 7 days. Again, 5 days is much better, but 6, if you're on vacation, you can't come back in, 6 days is okay. Because remember, here what we're doing is we're pushing in warm liquid nitrogen into a Dewar, and if it's already at a minimal level, you could quench the instrument. Some comments about the Dewar, why it's transferring. If you look, we can have here a pressure buildup. You don't touch that. That just stays the same. You have your liquid. Of course, the liquid is the one in which we're using to transfer our liquid nitrogen. We have our gas use, our gas use. So if we wanted gaseous nitrogen, we would use this. And this is our pressure relief valve. Now, what we have with Praxair is they actually have two pressure relief valves. One set at 230 psi and the other one set at 50 psi. The 230 psi, the main reason why that's there is because when it's on the truck, right, it sloshes around and it vents a lot, right? So we want to make sure that it's a high pressure so when we get it, it's still at 230 psi and there's lots of liquid in it. Once it's here, we start venting, all right? So if you ever walk up to a Dewar and you hear the hiss, that's because it's being vented down to 50. Now, why do you want it at 50 instead of 230? Well, think about this as a valve, right? It is, and it's a pinch point. And as this high pressure comes across this, it's going to come across and it's going to be at extremely high velocity. Again, we have this cold, we have it very, very brittle, so we don't want much force. So we can't open the valve as much. Therefore, we can't get as much liquid out of the tank into the Dewar as fast, even though it sounds like it is because there's a greater pressure. All right. So again, this is what you want to think about. If you have a tank at 230 psi, it's going to take you around an hour and a half to transfer the liquid into the Dewar in order to have a full Dewar. If you have this at 50 psi, it's going to take you around 30 to 40 minutes, about half the time in order to do it. So again, I greatly urge you to keep your Dewars when you're using them at 50 psi. Now, Becky's going to go ahead and order them, and when they come up here, she's going to go ahead and crack them to start venting them down. So every couple days you want to come in and just make sure that it is at 50, or it's just going to take you longer to transfer. Can you do it at 230 psi? Sure, but you have a couple other issues, mainly breaking the hose and just having a long fill rate. Once you do have it vented down to 50, I would leave it at 50. I would never repressurize it because you're going to lose a lot more gas, a lot more liquid in the liquid nitrogen Dewar, and the Dewar won't last as long. How many fills can you get from a Dewar? Well, it's really hard to explain. But we got this stuff from Matheson, we got this stuff from Praxair, and it almost depends on where you're getting it from. The liquid nitrogen and liquid helium are actually coming from Penn State. So they're taking a trip down to Du Bois, and from Du Bois then they're coming here. So after they're filled, they're actually sitting in the sun for 2 to 3 days before we get them, right? So that's part of the blow-off problem that we have. But liquid nitrogen is cheaper than getting it from Matheson. All right, so we're saving money. That's wonderful. So you can usually get around 2 to 3 fills out of a tank. Now, what if a tank doesn't have enough to do a fill all in one? What you can do is you can set this up and you can transfer the liquid nitrogen until it's empty. Then you can get another one, let the hose cool, or I guess warm up, and then attach a hose and then finish your transfer with a new tank. That's totally doable, although it takes a lot longer. So it's always good to look at the amount that you have. And on this level, you can see that I'm about 3/4 full. These gauges suck. They don't work very well at all. In fact, if you have the gauge, before you start, you can shake it, all right, and it might dislodge the gauge a little bit and give you an idea. And that's really all the gauge is to do. It's just to give you an idea. Are you full or are you empty? The gauge is really useless otherwise. You can use the shake method to figure out how full it is. You can shake it, and if it seems like really, really heavy, then it's probably full. But beware, there are some Dewars that are extremely heavy, all right? So just because it's hard to move, it could be because the wheels aren't greased as well. So really what you're doing is you're shaking it and you're trying to feel for the slosh, right? Is there a lot of slosh or is there a little bit of slosh? And that's a much better indicator of how much liquid nitrogen is in the tank. All right, so as I've been talking, it's been transferring over and it's starting to go a little bit slower. Well, what do I mean slower? It's not necessarily because of it being cooled down, all right? But I've reduced the pressure here in the tank because I'm actually transferring. So that's one reason it's getting lower. But also because all my components are getting colder, I'm not getting as much pressure on that end, all right? So it seems like it's going slower, but it's not going much slower. All right. If you put your ear to the hose, you can hear a pulsating. The pulse is good. What the pulse means is that you're actually getting liquid from the Dewar into the NMR. And you can increase the pulse. So, opening up the valve. That's about as fast as you want to go. Because again, remember, this hose is rubber. It's very, very brittle, right? So that's about as far as you want. Now, if you look at the ceiling tiles, you can see that the plumes are approaching the ceiling tile. Now, sometimes this is helpful and sometimes it's not. It almost depends on how humid of a day it is. The more humid the day is, the more visible these plumes are going to be, and the less humid day, the less visible they're going to be. But on this very humid day, even with the AC running, it's pretty humid, and you can see that it's touching the ceiling tiles, and that's good. That's about as fast as you want to go. Now, as it goes, you're going to see that you're going to end up with this crust, and you just knock it off every once in a while. All right, every once in a while. And this just allows you to see the plume a little bit better, and it also allows you to see if any liquid's coming over. Unlike the helium, you can actually see the nitrogen as it spurts out, and it spurts up, and maybe even starts to wet the condensate that's on the tube. So again, as I keep going, the pressure in the tank decreases because I'm removing volume. It's getting cold, all right, because it's evaporating, it's coming out. So I just keep on increasing this so I can still hear the Now, how do you know when the tank's empty? When you just hear a and no chug, right? Remember, when it's transferring liquid, you can hear the pulse of the liquid as it goes through the tube. When you just hear the gas with no pulse, that means that the tank is empty. And what you're actually doing is you're just transferring gas. And the gas is hitting the Dewar and it's actually evaporating the liquid. At that point, what you want to do is you want to close the valve, let everything warm up, take the Dewar, put it over for Becky to take back downstairs so that the gas company can get it in, and get a new Dewar. Roll the new Dewar in, go ahead and hook it up. Then you want to go ahead and start the new transfer, all right, with the new tank, and then until it tops off. All right? Once it's topped off, you're good and it's full. There is one key critical issue if you do this. What happens is the hose is all warmed up and it's now coated with all this water. All right? And the water's in and around the hose. Whenever you hook up the new tank and you open it, all that water freezes. And what happens, just like a driveway, you get water in a crack, it's going to get in the crack, and then as it freezes, it's going to expand. So you have a much higher chance for the crack to propagate down the tube if you transfer twice in the same day. Right? So you just want to be careful of that. Again, it's always great to start out with a new tank. And don't get me wrong, I like to save money just like the next guy. But if you know you're really low and you're not going to get much of a transfer, get a new tank. Just go ahead and start with a new tank and just go ahead and have Becky order another one. The nitrogen really isn't that expensive. It's not like the liquid helium. As you go, you just want to keep on increasing or opening the valve, and just hear the tempo as it pulses. And you just want to keep the pulse high. You want to keep it at a good constant rate. Again, it's right. So again, that's about as fast as we want. Over here, and the plumes are still pretty good. They're almost touching the ceiling. All right. So get off the water vapor. All right. Get off the water vapor. And you're just going to watch. You're just going to watch. And I promise, by about the time you're like, oh, come on. You know, I got to go home. I got to eat some dinner. Who knows? It's going to be done probably within 2 or 3 minutes after you get to that point. One reason why I keep on wiping this off is because I don't want water vapor to get back down into the tube. How do you know if water vapor has entered the tube? If one of the two tubes definitely has a bigger plume, then it's starting to become blocked. All right, it's starting to become blocked. The best way to clear the blockage is to go ahead and initiate the transfer, and then take your measuring tube, all right, and stick it in, all right, and break up the ice, all right. As you break up the ice with pressure behind it, it's going to push it out as you break it up. Why do you want to do that? So that the ice doesn't fall into the Dewar and then sit around the magnet. So what we should probably do is just keep on turning it down. And our goal here is just to top her off. Again, the pulse now is just so nice and slow. And if you slow it down too much, not to worry, you can always increase it again until it starts spitting again. But you want to keep a nice slow pace. And what you can actually see is the liquid coming over the lip, and you can actually see the water vapor that is actually frozen to the tube. You can actually see it's wet. All right, so this is actually wet with liquid nitrogen. All right, so this guy is definitely topped off. All right, so what we're going to do is just keep on closing her down. Okay. Now that it's closed, what we can do now is test to make sure that it's full. All right. So what we do is go ahead and take our trusty test tube. Pop her in. You want to go nice and slow. All right. And we're going to go ahead and measure. What we have here is 33 centimeters. All right, so we have 33 centimeters. So that's indicative of a full Dewar of liquid nitrogen. All right. So there's only a couple more things that we have to do. Number one is to go ahead and get off the water vapor, pull our tube, and if we dry this, or at least get as much water off the tube, it'll go on a lot easier. So we're going to stab it on. Now what you want to do is make sure that the tube goes around, right, the metal, nice and secure, that this isn't too kinked, that it can still get around, and that your slit, the slit that's right here, is still closed. All right, it's still closed. And so again, as the pressure builds up after we cap this one, this will open up and release the pressure and again cause the ice to form on the tube. So again, we're going to do the same thing with this one. Again, getting the water vapor that's frozen, so we'll fall back down. And again, we'll do the same thing. Make sure it's nice and dry. Slip her on, all right, and have it nice and secure. The last, I guess the second to last thing that we have to do is now this. And of course, it's extremely brittle because it's completely frozen. So what it takes is it takes about 20 minutes. 20 minutes for this thing to completely thaw out. And all we do, once it's thawed out, is lift this off, and again, place this back on just like we did the other two. All right, making sure that it's all secure. And then we remove it from the tank. All right, and again, remember there's some threads there, so the warmer it is, the better. You just pull it off if it's warm. If it's slightly still frozen, you're actually probably going to have to unwind it, all right, on the screw. And once it's done, you can go ahead and undo the Velcro and put it back onto the wall, all right, for storage. And that's how you fill it. The very is you fill out the logbook, all right. So in the logbook, you put your name, you put the date, you put the time in which you did the helium or the nitrogen fill. You put down that you did the nitrogen fill, and you put the two measurements that you took. The first measurement, 58, and the last measurement, 33 or 32, whatever it would be. All right, you put that in, and then it's good until the next time you have to fill it with liquid nitrogen. Thank you for watching.